A 9-year-old boy walked into a dimly lit restaurant known to be the headquarters of one of the most feared mafia families in the city. The men inside froze, forks midair, cigars hanging from lips, the sound of laughter dying instantly. He wasn't supposed to be there, especially not with the small black pistol gripped tightly in his trembling hand. "Which one of you is Salvatore Moretti?" he demanded, his voice shaky but his eyes steady. "I need to ask him something." At the far end of the long table, under a chandelier that barely worked, a man in a gray suit raised his head. Silver hair, heavy rings, and eyes that had seen more blood than sunlight. "That would be me, kid," Salvatore said softly. "You look a little young to be holding that kind of heat." The boy's jaw clenched. "My name is Leo Rossi. Where is my mother?" The words struck like a bullet. Every man at that table turned to look at their boss. Some frowned. Others shifted uncomfortably. "Put the gun down, Leo," Salvatore said, leaning back. "Nobody's going to hurt you." "I'll put it down when you tell me where she is," Leo insisted, voice rising. "She said if anything happened to her, I'd find you." "Your mother," Salvatore murmured, eyes narrowing. "What's her name?" "Isabella Rossi." The name drained color from the old man's face. A low murmur went through the room. Isabella. The one woman Salvatore had once loved, long before she vanished 9 years ago with no explanation. Now her son was here, pointing a gun at him. "Where is she?" Leo repeated, voice breaking slightly. "She's missing." She left a note saying, "Ask Salvatore Moretti." That's all. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. "Son," Salvatore said quietly, "put the gun down and we'll talk." "Don't call me son," Leo snapped. "You're not my father." Salvatore raised an eyebrow. "Then why come to me?" "Because she said you owed her," Leo said through gritted teeth, "and I want what's mine." The words made Salvatore sit forward slowly. "What exactly do you think I owe your mother?" Leo's grip tightened on the gun. "Her life." One of the men laughed nervously. "Boss, he's just a kid." "Shut up," Salvatore ordered. His gaze didn't leave Leo's face. "What happened to her?" "She was taken," Leo said. 2 nights ago. Men broke into our house. They didn't touch me. They just said, 'Tell Moretti the debt is due.' Then they took her." Salvatore cursed under his breath. The words meant only one thing: old enemies. "Who were they?" he asked. "Black coats, tattoos on their hands?" "A snake with wings," Salvatore's expression hardened. "The serpents." He turned to his right-hand man. "Get me Vincenzo." Now Leo's eyes flickered with both fear and determination. "You know them." "I know everyone," Salvatore replied. "But before I help you, you need to tell me something. How do you know to come here?" Leo took a folded photograph from his pocket. It was old, edges worn, showing Isabella smiling beside Salvatore, his arm around her, both younger, happier. "She said you'd remember." Salvatore reached for the photo with a trembling hand. Memories flooded back. Wine-soaked nights, whispered promises, and the one secret he'd buried deep. "She told you to come to me?" "She said if she ever disappeared, you'd know why." The room went silent again. Leo's hands were shaking now, but he didn't lower the gun. "Do you?" Salvatore looked at the photo for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally, voice rough. "I know exactly why." A beat of silence, then he stood. "Come with me." "No," Leo said. "You'll call your men and kill me." "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be," Salvatore replied. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." "Reminds me of someone I used to know." He turned toward the back office. "If you want your mother back, you'll follow me." Leo hesitated, then nodded slightly, gun still raised. The men around them parted silently as the boy and the old mafia boss disappeared into the back room. Behind closed doors, Salvatore poured himself a drink and gestured to a chair. Sit. Leo didn't. I said sit, Salvatore repeated, more like a command. Leo stayed standing. Why would they take her? Salvatore sighed, staring into his glass. Because of me. Because of something that happened a long time ago. Your mother tried to protect you from it. What are you talking about? Your mother used to work for me, Salvatore said. She was my accountant, my right hand, my everything. But one day she disappeared with something I needed. What did she take? Evidence, Salvatore said. Proof that could have destroyed my enemies, or me. He looked at the boy again, his eyes softer now. And she was pregnant when she left. Leo's breath caught. Are you saying? I'm saying, Salvatore interrupted. You came into this world surrounded by secrets, boy. And some of them are about to get you both killed if we don't act fast. Outside, thunder rumbled. A car screeched to a halt near the restaurant, and one of Salvatore's guards burst in. Boss, we've got company. Black coats. A lot of them Salvatore stood instantly. Get the kid to the cellar. Now, I'm not going anywhere without my mom, Leo yelled. You want to see her again? Salvatore shouted back. Then do as I say. Leo froze for a moment, his small hands trembling as two men grabbed his shoulders to guide him toward the hidden door behind the bar. He struggled, shouting, Let me go. I'm not scared of you. Salvatore turned sharply, his voice slicing through the chaos. Nobody touches him rough. The guards released Leo immediately. The serpents won't stop until they get what they came for, Salvatore muttered, pulling a pistol from his jacket and cocking it with one smooth motion. And what's that? Leo demanded. Me, Salvatore replied, and whatever your mother took from them 9 years ago. He turned to one of his lieutenants. Seal the front. Lights out. The chandeliers dimmed, and the restaurant was swallowed by shadows. Leo watched as Salvatore moved with calm precision, the kind of control that came from a lifetime of danger. You said she worked for you, Leo said, following behind. If she did, then why didn't you protect her? Salvatore stopped mid-step. The boy's question hit deep. Because she left before I could, he said quietly. I searched for her. When I found nothing, I assumed she didn't want to be found. He looked down at the boy. Turns out I was wrong. The door to the cellar opened with a creak. The narrow stairway descended into darkness. Get down there, Salvatore ordered. Stay until I tell you it's safe. What about you? Leo asked. I've got business to handle. Salvatore turned away, but Leo's voice stopped him again. You're not going to help me, are you? You're just going to fight your stupid war while she's out there. Watch your mouth, one of the guards snapped, stepping forward. But Salvatore raised a hand. He's right, he admitted. And that's exactly why I'm not hiding. He crouched to meet Leo's eyes. I made a promise to your mother once. If she ever needed me, I'd be there. I intend to keep that promise. Leo stared at him, searching for any sign of deceit, then finally nodded. Then I'm coming with you. You're 9, Salvatore said. You'll get yourself killed. You said they're coming for both of us, Leo replied. Then I'm safer next to you than hiding in a hole. For a moment, Salvatore almost smiled. You really are her son. Outside, gunfire erupted, the sharp sound of bullets tearing through glass. The guards took position, shouting orders. Salvatore pushed Leo behind a pillar. Stay low. The restaurant became a battlefield. Shadows darted between overturned tables, flashes of muzzle fire lighting up the room. Salvatore fired back methodically, each shot deliberate. 2 men fell near the entrance. They're breaching the side door, someone yelled. Fall back, Salvatore barked. Get the kid out the back. Leo refused to move. His eyes were locked on a man entering through the shattered front, tall, bald, and wearing a ring with the snake and wings insignia. "That's him," Leo whispered. "The one who took her." The man grinned when he saw the boy. "You've got your mother's eyes," he sneered. Salvatore aimed his gun. "Tell me where she is, or you die right here." "You think she's still alive?" The man laughed. "You should know better, Don Moretti." Salvatore's shot came faster than his words. The man dropped instantly. The room went quiet, except for the ringing in Leo's ears. "Boss, we've got to move," one of the lieutenants shouted. Salvatore grabbed Leo's hand and pulled him toward the back exit. They burst through the kitchen door and into the alley, rain pouring down like bullets. Black SUVs screeched around the corner. "Keep your head down," Salvatore shouted, firing as they ran. They ducked into a side street, sprinting through puddles until they reached a rusted garage door. Salvatore punched a code on the keypad and dragged Leo inside. The door slammed shut, cutting off the sound of sirens. Inside was a small room lit by a single bulb, filled with old files, weapons, and photographs. Leo looked around. "What is this place?" "Safe house," Salvatore said, "for emergencies like this." He locked the door and turned to the boy. "Now tell me exactly what happened the night your mother disappeared." Leo took a breath. "We were eating dinner. She looked nervous all day, kept saying someone was watching the house. Then she told me to hide under the bed. I heard men shouting. She screamed once. Then they were gone. You didn't see them?" "Just one." "The man you shot," Salvatore clenched his fists. "Then she's alive," he said. "If they wanted her dead, they'd have done it then." "They're using her." "Using her for what?" Leo asked. "To get to me," Salvatore said. "She still has something they want. Something she never gave back." He opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty envelope. Before she left, Isabella stole a ledger. "It contains every name, every deal, every dirty cop and politician tied to the Serpents. If they get it back, I lose my leverage. And if they don't, they'll kill her trying." Leo stared at the floor, voice trembling. "So what do? We find her before they do." Salvatore opened a steel case, revealing 2 pistols. He handed one to the boy. "You ever used one?" "Mom taught me," Leo said softly. Salvatore nodded with approval. "Then you'll know how to stay alive." The old Mafia boss knelt and looked the boy in the eyes. "You've got courage, but courage gets people killed if it's not controlled. From now on, you listen to me. You move when I say move, and you shoot only when I tell you. Understand?" Leo nodded firmly. "Good," Salvatore said, standing, "because tonight we're going to war." The war started in silence. Salvatore sat behind a desk covered in maps and old photographs, the air thick with the smell of dust and gun oil. Rain hammered against the tin roof while Leo watched him load magazines one by one. "You sure you want to do this?" Salvatore asked, glancing at the boy. "You could walk away now. Forget this ever happened." Leo shook his head. "They took my mother." "I'm not walking away from that." The answer made Salvatore's eyes soften for the briefest second. "That's what I thought." He slid a small notebook toward Leo. "This belonged to your mother. She kept notes on everyone she didn't trust, including me." Read it. The pages were filled with scribbles, phone numbers, and coded messages. "She was planning to run long before she vanished," Salvatore said. "She found out things about the Serpents that even I didn't know." "Then why didn't she tell you?" "Because she didn't trust anyone," Salvatore admitted. "Not after she realized someone close to me was working with them." Leo frowned. "You mean a traitor?" "Exactly." Salvatore leaned closer. "I need to find out who it was before they find her." How do you know she's still alive? Leo asked. Because if she were dead, they'd have sent proof. They're baiting me out. He stood, putting on his coat. And I'm about to take that bait. Leo looked worried. You said they want you dead. They do, Salvatore replied. But sometimes the only way to win is to make them think they've already won. He picked up a phone and dialed a number. Rico, get the cars ready. We're going to the docks. When he hung up, he turned to Leo. You stay close. Don't speak to anyone. If I say run, you run. Leo nodded again, gripping the pistol tightly. They left the safe house through a back alley, 2 black sedans waiting outside. The night was alive with sirens and thunder. Leo climbed in beside Salvatore, his heart pounding. The convoy sped through the wet streets until the city lights faded behind them. The docks loomed ahead, dark, silent, smelling of salt and gasoline. This is where it started, Salvatore murmured, and where it ends. As the cars stopped, armed men emerged from the shadows, rifles ready. Rico approached, his coat soaked through. Boss, they're here. 5 trucks, heavy firepower. Salvatore nodded. Keep them boxed in. Nobody fires until I say, so Leo peeked through the windshield and saw silhouettes moving between shipping containers. One of them was dragging a woman with a hood over her head. That's her, he whispered. Salvatore followed his gaze, his jaw tightening. Stay down. He opened the car door and stepped into the rain, raising both hands. I'm here, he called out. You've got what you wanted. Now let the woman go. A tall figure stepped into the dim light, Donato Vieri, leader of the Serpents. His scarred face twisted into a grin. Salvatore Moretti, he drawled. Didn't think you'd show up yourself. You took something that belongs to me, Salvatore said coldly. Let her go, and I'll forget you made this mistake. Donato laughed. Mistake? You've been a thorn in my side for too long, old friend. Isabella has something I need. You'll get her back when I have that ledger. You'll never find it, Salvatore said. She hid it where no one can touch it. Then maybe her son knows, Donato smirked. Bring the boy. Leo's heart raced. Before Salvatore could react, 2 serpent gunmen dragged him out of the car. Don't hurt him, Salvatore shouted, aiming his pistol. Donato raised a hand. Easy, Don. You shoot, she dies. He nodded to one of his men, who pulled the hood off the woman's head. Isabella stood there, bruised but alive, her eyes locking on Leo's. Mom! Leo cried. She tried to move toward him, but Donato grabbed her arm. You must be proud, Donato sneered. Your boy's brave. Takes after his mother. You touch him, and I'll tear your family tree out by the roots, Salvatore warned. Donato smiled. Big words for a man surrounded. A dozen guns aimed at Salvatore's crew. Leo looked at his mother, tears cutting through the grime on his cheeks. Mom, where's the ledger? Don't answer him, Salvatore barked. Donato's patience snapped. He pulled out a knife and pressed it against Isabella's throat. I'm running out of time, Salvatore. So am I, the old boss said quietly. Now. The sound of engines roared across the docks. From the shadows, 3 armored cars burst through the fence, headlights blinding, men from Salvatore's hidden crew jumping out, guns blazing. Chaos exploded. Donato's men scattered, returning fire. Salvatore grabbed Leo and pulled him behind a container as bullets tore through the air. Stay behind me, he ordered. Where's Mom? Leo shouted. We'll get her. Salvatore fired twice, dropping 2 gunmen. Rico's men swarmed forward, outnumbering the Serpents. Boss! Rico yelled. We've got them pinned. Keep pressure, Salvatore shouted back. He turned to Leo. You ready to do something stupid? What? We're gonna get your mother. They moved fast through the chaos. slipping between containers. Salvatore fired at anyone who came close. They found Isabella tied to a steel beam, struggling to break free. Leo ran to her, cutting the ropes with a broken piece of glass. "Mom, we have to go." "Leo, no!" she said urgently. "It's a trap." Too late. A gun cocked behind them. Donato stood there, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, but still grinning. "You think I didn't plan for this?" he hissed. Salvatore turned, but Donato fired first. The bullet hit him in the side, knocking him to his knees. "No!" Leo screamed, raising his pistol. Donato laughed. "You're not going to shoot me, boy. You don't have it in you." Leo's hands shook, but his eyes didn't waver. "My mom taught me how." He pulled the trigger. Donato staggered back, shot clean through the leg. He fell, cursing. Isabella rushed to Salvatore's side, pressing her hands against the wound. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I told you he'd find us." "I promised you once," Salvatore said weakly. "I'd keep you safe." Sirens wailed in the distance, police closing in. "We've got to move," Rico shouted, running up. "Now!" Leo helped his mother lift Salvatore, and together they stumbled toward the cars. Behind them, Donato tried to reach for his gun, but Leo turned and kicked it away. "That's for my mom," he said coldly. They sped away from the docks as police lights flooded the horizon. Isabella held Salvatore's hand tightly in the back seat. "You're losing too much blood," she said. "I've had worse," he muttered. "Just tell me one thing." "What?" she asked. "Where did you hide it?" Isabella met his eyes. "The ledger?" "Yeah." She smiled faintly. "Where no one would ever look." Salvatore watched her through half-lidded eyes as the car tore down the rain-slicked road. He was pale, bleeding through his shirt, but his mind was still sharp. "You always were 2 steps ahead," he murmured. Isabella held his hand tighter. "And you were always 2 steps too late." Leo sat between them, holding his mother's arm, terrified she might disappear again. "Mom," he whispered, "where is it? Where did you hide the ledger?" Isabella looked at him, then at Salvatore. "You said the serpents wanted the ledger to destroy you. But you were wrong. They wanted it because it names their real boss." Salvatore frowned. "Donato wasn't the top?" "No," she said, "he's just muscle. The real one sits higher. He's the one who gave the order to kill me 9 years ago." "Who?" Salvatore asked, voice hardening. Isabella hesitated, as if saying it would seal their fate. "Carlo De Luca." Rico cursed from the front seat. "You mean the head of the De Luca syndicate?" "He's supposed to be retired." "He's not," Isabella said. "He runs everything from the shadows. He owns half the politicians in this city. The serpents are his soldiers." "And you've got proof?" Salvatore asked. Isabella nodded. "Enough to burn him to the ground." "Where is it?" "Somewhere only Leo could find it if something happened to me." Leo blinked. "Me?" "I hid it in your school," Isabella said softly. "Inside the piano in the music room. You loved playing it when you were little." Salvatore almost laughed, a grim sound. "Smart. Nobody would ever think to look there." Suddenly, the car lurched as bullets shattered the rear window. "They're still following us!" Rico shouted. "Hang on!" He swerved hard, tires screeching. 2 black SUVs sped after them. Salvatore leaned out the window, firing. "Get us to the bridge!" he yelled. "We lose them there!" The chase roared through the empty streets until they hit the old industrial bridge. Rico slammed the brakes. "End of the line!" Salvatore stepped out, gun ready, blood soaking through his side. The serpent's cars stopped 50 feet away, headlights cutting through the darkness. Carlo De Luca stepped out. White hair, perfect suit, no emotion. "You should have stayed dead, Isabella," he said coldly. "I don't die that easy," she shot back. Carlo's eyes shifted to Leo. So this is the boy. The one you hid everything for. He's got nothing to do with this, Salvatore warned. Oh, he has everything to do with this, Carlo replied. His father would have told you that. The words hit like lightning. Salvatore froze. What did you say? Carlo smirked. Did she never tell you? Isabella didn't just run because of the ledger. She ran because she was pregnant. With your child, Leo's eyes widened. What? Isabella's breath caught. Carlo, shut up. Too late, he sneered. He deserves to know. Salvatore looked at Isabella, searching her face. Is it true? Her silence was answer enough. You should have told me, he said softly. You had enemies, she whispered. I wanted to keep him safe. Carlo's laughter cut through the rain. Touching. The old Don finally learns he's a father, just in time to watch his family die. His men raised their guns. Salvatore moved first. Get down, he roared, firing into the night. The bridge erupted with gunfire. Rico's men dove for cover, answering back. Isabella pulled Leo behind a concrete barrier. Bullets sparked against metal beams, echoing like thunder. Salvatore moved like a man possessed, protecting both of them, every shot deliberate. He took out two of Carlo's guards before one bullet hit him again in the shoulder. Dad, Leo shouted, without realizing what he'd said. Salvatore turned, eyes meeting his son's. Despite the chaos, a small smile crossed his face. That's the first time you called me that. Don't die, Leo yelled. Not today, Salvatore said, forcing himself to stand. He aimed for Carlo, but the mob boss had already slipped into his car. He's running, Isabella shouted. Rico, cut him off. Rico jumped behind the wheel of one of the sedans, flooring it. The car spun out, crashing into Carlo's SUV, blocking the exit. Carlo stumbled out, gun drawn. Salvatore limped toward him, bleeding but unbroken. It ends tonight, Carlo, he said. You can't kill me, Carlo spat. You're already dead in this city. Everyone you ever trusted works for me. Not everyone, Salvatore replied. This is for Isabella. For Leo, he fired twice. The first shot hit Carlo in the hand, disarming him. The second hit him square in the chest. The old man staggered back, eyes wide, and fell into the river below. Silence followed. Rain poured harder, washing the blood off the bridge. Rico ran to Salvatore, catching him before he collapsed. Boss, stay with me. Isabella knelt beside him, tears streaming. You saved us. Salvatore chuckled weakly. You always said I needed redemption. You're not dying here, she said. We're taking you to a hospital. No hospitals, he whispered. Too many eyes. Take me home. They loaded him into the car, Leo sitting beside him, holding his hand. Dad, Leo said quietly. We did it. No, Salvatore replied, his voice faint. You did? You saved her? The car disappeared into the rain as the bridge grew quiet behind them. Hours later, they reached one of Salvatore's hidden estates outside the city. His wounds were patched by a doctor loyal to him, but he remained weak. Leo stayed by his side the whole night. When Salvatore woke, morning light spilled across the room. Isabella stood at the window, the city skyline in the distance. You should rest, she said softly. I've rested enough, he replied. We still have work to do. Carlo's gone, Isabella said. It's over. Salvatore shook his head. It's never over. The men under him will come looking for revenge. We have to finish this before they rebuild. How? She asked. With the ledger, he said. The names in there aren't just criminals. They're politicians, judges, cops. Expose them, and the whole network collapses. Leo stepped forward. Then we find it today. Salvatore smiled faintly. You sound like me already. They moved like ghosts through the city, slipping past patrols and shuttered storefronts until they reached the school where Isabella had said the ledger was hidden. It was early, the kind of pale morning when the air still tasted of rain and possibility. Leo felt a strange mix of excitement and dread as they climbed the rusted fire escape and peered through the music room window. The piano sat in the corner, its black lacquer dulled by dust, a ribbon of sunlight catching on the worn keys. Salvatore glanced at Isabella, then at Leo, and nodded. Quietly, they slipped inside through a side door Salvatore had his men cut earlier. The building smelled like old paper and chalk. Hallways stretched before them, empty and echoing. Leo's footsteps were barely a whisper. He had been here as a child, when school felt like a safe world, a world where lessons ended at 3 and nothing bled into the cafeteria. Now, with a ledger worth lives, sitting inside an instrument he loved, the place felt like a trap. Salvatore moved with the same careful precision he used when taking a room. He checked corners, listened for echoes, his hands steady despite the bandage at his side. Isabella stayed close to him, rubbing her thumb against his palm. "This is stupid," Rico muttered, crouched behind a filing cabinet with a rifle. "Schools have cameras." "Not this one," Salvatore said. "Old wiring, no upgrades." Isabella chose it for that reason. They reached the music room without incident. Leo's heart hammered as he approached the piano. His small fingers trembled when he lifted the lid. The inside smelled like varnish and memory. There, tucked beneath the strings where a child might hide a note, was a metal tin wrapped in oilcloth. Leo hesitated only a second before pulling it free. The ledger inside was thicker than he expected, bound with fraying twine, its edges stained. He ran a finger over the cover and felt the weight of names, the weight of truth. "We have it," he whispered. Salvatore exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. "Good. Now get out." They moved toward the exit with the ledger between them. That was when the lights clicked on. A dozen men in black stepped out from the shadows, guns trained on them. "Thought you could sneak away with my property," a voice said. Donato, or one of his replacements, stepped into the doorway, flanked by men who looked like they had come straight out of a private war. Salvatore's face tightened. "I thought we were done with this." "You thought wrong," the man said. "Carlo might be in the river, but his network still has teeth." "You cannot bury a ghost." Isabella moved in front of Leo. "You won't take him," she said. "Leave the boy out of this." The leader sneered. "The boy is why you had the ledger in the first place. Hand it over." Salvatore looked at Leo, then at Isabella. "Run," he mouthed. Leo clenched the ledger to his chest and bolted toward the back door. Bullets chewed into the plaster around him. Rico and Salvatore answered fire, turning the school into a crossfire. Leo darted down a corridor, adrenaline carrying him faster than fear. He could hear shouting and the thud of feet. At the end of the hallway, a janitor's closet door was ajar. He dove inside and slammed it shut, pressing his back against cold metal cans of polish. The ledger burned in his arms like a secret too hot to hold. Outside, in the echoing rooms, Salvatore fought like a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Isabella flanked him, her eyes hard, her hands steady even though she was shaking inside. The gunfight spread through the building, students' closets and trophy cases turning into cover. Salvatore took a hard blow to the arm but kept moving toward the music room. He could not leave Leo with the ledger if it meant the boy would be dragged into a life of running forever. The leader of the attackers called for reinforcements over a crackling radio. "Get them alive." DeLuca wants names cleaned from that book, not bullets. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. The voice of someone who did not get his hands dirty but ordered other people to do it. The smell of oil and polish closed in on Leo. He unwrapped the ledger, breath caught in his throat. Names filled the pages, rows of ink that might as well have been curses. Judges, councilmen, contractors, police captains, who had smiled under city lights while they sold their souls. He recognized a face from the news, the kind of man who smiled at ribbon cuttings and shook hands while his real work was done in rooms like this. He ran his fingers over the next page and saw a name that stopped his breath. A familiar police insignia was scribbled aside a signature he had seen on hospital forms. Marcus Palmer, a detective with the city department, known for preying on families who had nowhere to turn. Leo's stomach dropped. He had heard rumors. Marcus had been a shadow at the edges of his childhood. The realization made the ledger heavier. The janitor's closet became a cathedral of noise. Footsteps passed, then faded as men searched other rooms. Leo risked a peek through the slats and saw Rico and Isabella pushing a wounded Salvatore toward a side exit. They were bleeding, but alive. Relief flooded him so hard he felt dizzy. This was their chance. He tucked the ledger under his shirt and slipped out, keeping to the shadows. The corridor was clear. He moved like a shadow, silent and desperate. When he reached the back stairwell, he nearly collided with a tall figure in a suit. "Thought you could run with it, kid?" the man said. Leo's hands tightened around the book. "Who are you?" The man smiled without warmth. "Agent Calloway, Internal Affairs." The words hit like a punch. For a second, Leo thought he had traded one danger for another. Then Calloway reached into his jacket and pulled out a badge. But it was the kind of badge that feels like a lie. "We have a warrant to search this building," he said. "Step aside." Leo's eyes darted to the stairwell where Salvatore and the others had gone. He could hear them moving, the clatter of a scuffle. He had to get the ledger to them. "No," he said, the single syllable a dam breaking. He bolted, taking Calloway by surprise. The man cursed and chased after him, but Leo was faster. He barreled down the stairs into the courtyard just as Salvatore and Isabella emerged, dragging a man who was bleeding and swearing. The courtyard erupted into a firefight again as the attackers regrouped. Salvatore saw the ledger before Leo could scream. He lunged, snatching it from the boy's chest as bullets slammed into the pavement around them. "You idiot," Salvatore hissed, but there was no anger in it, only relief. Rico covered their retreat, firing, until the attackers fell back. Calloway stepped into the light, hands raised, but his face was pale with something like anger. "You cannot go anywhere with that book," he said. "You have no jurisdiction here." Salvatore locked eyes with Calloway. "You think I don't know who you work for?" The man's jaw tightened. "This city is rotten to the core. People like you and DeLuca and Moretti have had their run. We are cleaning house. Hand it over, and we can find a legal way to handle this." Isabella laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Legal? Not in your city." Calloway's face hardened. "Then you will make this harder on yourself." Salvatore understood the code of the world he had lived in for decades. There were hands in gloves that pulled strings and hands in pockets that fed rumors to men with badges. For a second, he weighed choices that had no right answer. Then he tucked the ledger under his arm, turned toward Leo and Isabella, and ran. They disappeared into the alley as Calloway barked orders and police lights began to flood the perimeter. The ledger was heavier now, not just because of the names inside, but because of what it promised. It promised a reckoning, and with it, a world that could not simply go back to sleep. They split into 3 cars, the crew scattering like seeds. Salvatore drove, Isabella beside him, Leo in the back clutching a photograph he had kept of his mother smiling in another life. The city seemed to close around them. Somewhere, men they had thought buried were stirring. Someone in a corner office poured coffee and watched on a screen, the image of a boy with a ledger in his hands flickering like a threat. Salvatore felt the old certainty return. the kind that came from knowing the chessboard and the pieces. "We expose them fast," he said. "We do not let one night decide everything." Isabella nodded. "We leak it to the right people. We burn everything down at once." Leo looked between them, feeling like a bridge between the past and something he could not yet name. "We do it tomorrow," he said. "We do it together." They agreed on a plan that made Salvatore uneasy and Isabella hopeful. They would not trust the city police or any official channel. Instead, they would pick 3 people who still owed favors, 3 journalists who still believed in the truth, and dump the ledger into the public all at once. It was the only way to make the names too hot to bury. Rico made the calls from a safe number while Salvatore and Isabella watched Leo sleep on the couch, the photograph clutched to his chest. There was something fragile about the boy in sleep, and something fierce about the way his hands curled around the paper. He had been pushed into the adult world without consent, and he had somehow become its sharp edge. Salvatore tried not to think about how many men would try to blunt him. They moved like a small army of ghosts. One contact hid the ledger inside a courier envelope and sealed it in a locker across town. Another friend staged a phony medical emergency that distracted watchful eyes. The 3 journalists agreed to meet in a diner at dawn and promised to hold the files until they had simultaneous clearance to publish. It felt like pulling teeth to get anyone to risk exposure. But the ledger carried weight, and weight bends people. By midnight, the city was a slow throb of neon and rain. Salvatore could feel eyes watching them from windows and from rooms where political favors were bought like cheap wine. He thought of Carlo falling into the river. He thought of the phone calls he had ignored for years because pretending to be dead is easier than paying for sins. He put his hand on Isabella's shoulder and felt how thin and tired she had become. She had survived on fear for 9 years and still managed to smile at the edges when she caught Leo being a kid at the wrong moments. Tonight, more than ever, she looked like someone returning from the ocean exhausted, face salted but alive. At dawn, they met the journalists. The diner smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. The men were careful and serious, the kind of people who had seen lives blown apart by single paragraphs and still came back for the truth. Salvatore handed over a photocopy, a single page, as insurance, while Rico supplied a small, encrypted file that would unlock the rest once the signal was given. The ledger would be released in 1 hour. The plan relied on coordinated release, on social pressure, on ordinary citizens seeing the names and refusing to let them go back into shadow. It was a gamble that could burn the city down or set it on a slow course towards something like justice. No sooner had the journalists left than the first betrayal unfolded. Calloway called Salvatore and sounded like a man with a headache. He said he wanted a truce, a clean handoff, a central place where the ledger could be processed legally. Salvatore listened and pretended to consider it while Rico checked for movement outside. Isabella watched him and read his face like a map. When the call ended, she frowned. Calloway was too smooth, and his timing was wrong. A clean handoff never involved men like Calloway. It involved sellers and witnesses. They decided not to trust him. An hour later, the signal went out. Social feeds lit with screens. Names scrolled across a dozen platforms. Videos of courthouse plaques and handshakes were juxtaposed with transactions from the ledger. The city woke up like a man punched in the sleep. Offices emptied and phones started ringing in rooms where the air had always been thick with compromises. People who had smiled at public ribbon cuttings found their faces darkened by association. Lawyers called their clients and demanded explanations. Crowds gathered outside council offices. It was immediate and raw, and it was everything Salvatore had hoped for. Then the retaliation began. A coordinated sweep hit the diner where the journalists had left documents. Calloway's men moved with legal warrants and with something else, a speed that suggested prearrangement. The journalists were detained, cameras seized, sources threatened. Social feeds flickered as networks debated who had leaked the ledger and why. The people in power had arms that reached into courtrooms and into newsrooms. They moved like a shielded organism. Salvatore felt the ground shift. He expected pressure and planned for it. But the force of it was like weather. He had been a weathered man for years, and now it felt like the storm had finally found a way inside his bones. Men around him were rounded up. Safe houses were exposed. The city had been ready for a leak and had contingencies that worked like gears. It was not enough to have names. You needed witnesses and stubborn institutions. Most institutions were not stubborn at all when the right men called. Isabella watched the feeds with a horror that made her change. "We have to move," she said. "Calloway is cleaning house." Her voice did not tremble, but her hands did. She had thought the ledger would be a hammer. It was proving to be a flare that drew predators. Salvatore decided the next move would be offensive. If the city would not allow the ledger to breathe, they would force air into the lungs of the story. He would go to the one place he never wanted to return to. He would go to the center where power loved to hide. The courthouse was protected by law and by men who thought themselves untouchable. He would not enter it to ask for mercy. He would enter to expose. They planned a dramatic public confession. Salvatore would walk into the plaza and speak. Isabella would stand beside him and tell one truth. Leo would not be there for the first act. It was too dangerous for him to be the public face. He would prepare the ledger, the videos, the documents, and then they would release them again. There were risks. The biggest was that doing anything public gave Calloway the chance to reveal something worse. Calloway had looked at Salvatore like a man who had been forgiven too easily. Salvatore wondered whether there was a price for that forgiveness. 2 days later, the plaza was full. People came because they were furious, and because they were curious. They came because sometimes the city needed a spectacle to remember how to claw its way back to decency. Salvatore walked to the front, a cane in one hand and the ledger under his jacket. He was bruised and gray and terrifyingly real. Isabella stood with him. Cameras hovered, the same ones that had once celebrated the woman for a ribbon cutting and then forgotten her. They looked like vultures and like witnesses. He began to speak. He told a story not about past glories, but about the ledger, about names, about the day when a little woman left with a book and a baby and the right to keep the record of crimes. He used words that were simple and sharp, and the crowd listened because there was an honesty in his voice that the city had not heard in many years. He spoke of Carlo De Luca and of Donato and of men in suits who signed papers while children were moved from home to home without anyone asking why. He did not flatter the crowd. He asked them to look at the names and to decide. The first applause felt like a small wind. News vans surged forward, phones recorded. Public pressure has one honest currency, which is shame, and shame can be corrosive. The ledger was not just a list of names. It was a mirror. People stared into it and did not like what they saw. Then, from the crowd, 2 men stepped forward and called Salvatore a liar. They accused him of being an opportunist, of selling out. One of them was a rounded man with a steady face. He called himself Agent Calloway. The air shifted. Calloway's voice carried legal weight and theatrical timing. He accused Salvatore of planting the ledger, of bribing journalists, of manipulating a city into chaos. His proof came in the form of a small legal brief and a single photograph. The photograph showed Salvatore in a closed room with a man whose face was not in the ledger, but whose pockets had always been deep. The crowd hesitated. Doubt can spread faster than truth. Isabella stepped forward, her voice thin but loud. She called Calloway a liar and asked him to read the ledger. He smiled and refused. Calloway's men moved in. There were arrests pressed against the stage, and men in plain clothes who moved with practiced ease. Salvatore watched them with a tiredness that felt like bone. He had known better than to trust crowds, and he had known better than to trust men like Calloway. But he had not known how much the city would fight to keep its own face clean. In the confusion, someone fired. It was impossible to tell who had started it. One bullet hit the lectern. Another shattered a window in a building across the plaza. Panic erupted. People ran. Salvatore grabbed Isabella and pulled her down. Leo, watching from a nearby alley with 3 of Salvatore's men, saw the chaos and felt something cold and clear inside him. He had wanted fireworks, justice, a clean ending. None of it felt clean anymore. The ledger burned in his mind like a promise that might never be kept. They left the plaza in a stretch of violence and rain. Calloway's men claimed they had evidence of fabrication. Calloway himself glided away, with the kind of smoothness that meant he had friends to buffer him. The ledger remained in a locker, guarded by men who now worried about every friend and every phone call. The city smelled like rain and paper and something else, the metallic tang of fear. Back at the safe house, Salvatore sat and stared at the ledger on the table. He had fought a war that had not ended in victory. He had exposed a wound that bled into everything. Isabella sat opposite, bruised and tired. Rico paced like a caged animal. Leo stayed quiet, a child in a room that had been made for grown men. "Tomorrow," Salvatore said, voice small, "we go deeper." The night after the plaza felt like the end of something, and the beginning of something worse. The storm had not passed. It had simply shifted form. Salvatore sat by the window of the safe house, smoke curling from his cigarette, staring out at the city that had devoured itself. The streetlights looked like fading stars, the skyline nothing but jagged silhouettes. Isabella stood behind him, arms folded, her face lit only by the glow of the television. Every channel told a different story. Some called Salvatore a hero who exposed the corruption rotting the city's core. Others painted him as a manipulator who fabricated evidence to weaken the government. The truth was buried beneath noise, and noise was what the powerful fed on. Leo sat on the couch, the ledger open across his lap. His small fingers traced the names like Braille, memorizing them, refusing to look away. "They're saying it's fake," he said quietly. "They're saying we lied." Salvatore exhaled smoke through his nose. "That's what they do when they're scared." "But if they convince everyone it's fake, then she died for nothing," Leo whispered, voice breaking. Isabella turned sharply. "Don't say that." "I'm still here." He looked up, eyes glistening. "You almost died." "And for what?" "They still run everything." Salvatore stubbed his cigarette out and stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "You're right, kid. The city doesn't change because of one speech or one book. It changes because people stop being afraid. That ledger's not just proof, it's a key. We just haven't used it the right way yet." "What do you mean?" Isabella asked, weary. "The ledger isn't just names," Salvatore said, tapping its cover. "It's connections. Calloway, DeLuca, the serpents, they all tie to something bigger. That's what we missed." He went to his desk, spread out a map, and began to draw lines between locations, marking docks, warehouses, courthouses, banks. "You think there's another layer?" Isabella said. "There always is," Salvatore replied. "Power never exists in one place. It's a web." Leo came closer, studying the map. "Then let's find the spider." Salvatore's eyes flicked toward him with quiet pride. "That's the spirit." Rico entered the room carrying a tablet. "Boss, we've got a problem. They found our men at the South Pier. Someone tipped them off." "Who?" Salvatore asked. Rico hesitated. "Luca. Isabella's eyes widened. You're Luca? The one who helped us escape the docks? He sold us, Rico said bitterly. Calloway's offering pardons for anyone who cooperates. Salvatore's jaw tightened. Then it's time to remind them what loyalty means. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small metal box, the kind used to store old cassette tapes. Inside was a recording device. I made this 9 years ago, he said. Back when Isabella left. I thought I'd never have to use it. He pressed play. A voice filled the room, Carlo De Luca's voice, cold and clear. If the girl runs, let her. She's insurance. When Moretti dies, she dies with him. The tape ended. Silence followed. Leo's fists clenched. We can use that, he said. We can show everyone what they did. We will, Salvatore replied. But we'll need one last piece. Proof that Calloway is working with what's left of De Luca's men. How do we get that? Isabella asked. We let him come to us. The next evening, Salvatore sent out a message through an encrypted line pretending to offer Calloway a trade, the original ledger for full immunity and protection for his family. The bait was perfect. Calloway's arrogance wouldn't let him refuse. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned cathedral near the river. It was the kind of place where oaths were made and broken in equal measure. The rain had returned, heavier now, falling like judgment. The cathedral loomed against the skyline, broken stained glass, catching flashes of lightning. Salvatore and Rico arrived first, scanning the shadows. Leo and Isabella waited in a car nearby, the ledger locked in a steel case on Leo's lap. You shouldn't be here, Isabella whispered. You said we were done running, Leo replied. I'm not hiding again. She stared at him, realizing the boy had stopped being a child somewhere between the docks and the plaza. Inside, Calloway appeared with 2 agents, his suit immaculate even in the rain. You came, Salvatore said. You have something I want, Calloway replied. And I have something you'll need, an exit plan, Salvatore smirked. You think I'm stupid enough to believe you'd let us walk away? Calloway stepped closer. I think you're desperate enough to try. He extended a hand. The ledger. Salvatore didn't move. Before I hand it over, I need to know one thing. Why keep this going? Carlo's dead. The serpents are scattered. What's left for you to gain? Calloway's calm cracked slightly. Control, he said simply. The ledger doesn't destroy power, it transfers it. You hand it to me and I become the man in control. You get to live, and the city gets stability. You mean silence, Salvatore said. Calloway shrugged. Same thing. A shot rang out from the balcony. One of Calloway's men fell. The second dove for cover. Salvatore didn't flinch. You brought more than 2 men, he said. So did I. From the shadows above, Rico's crew opened fire. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Calloway ducked behind a pew, shouting orders. Salvatore advanced slowly, gun steady. It's over, Calloway, he shouted. You can't bury this anymore. You think this changes anything? Calloway yelled back. You'll die tonight, and tomorrow they'll call it justice. Lightning flashed through the shattered windows, illuminating the battlefield like a scene out of purgatory. Salvatore's men moved like ghosts, picking off Calloway's agents one by one. Then a scream cut through the noise. Isabella. She had left the car, running into the cathedral with Leo behind her. Mom, get down, Leo shouted, but she was already moving toward Salvatore. A bullet tore through the air, grazing her shoulder. Salvatore caught her before she fell. You shouldn't have come, he said. Neither should you, she whispered back. Calloway took advantage of the distraction, standing and firing at Salvatore. The bullet hit his thigh, dropping him to one knee. You're finished, Calloway snarled, raising his gun again, but Leo fired first. The shot echoed through the cathedral, slamming into Calloway's arm. His gun fell, clattering to the stone floor. He stared at the boy in disbelief. "You—" Leo's face was pale, but his voice steady. "My mom taught me how." Calloway fell to the floor, clutching his wound. Rico stepped forward and kicked the gun away. Salvatore limped closer, pointing his pistol at Calloway's head. "You had a choice," he said. "You could have built something honest." "Honest men don't survive in this city," Calloway spat. "Neither do monsters," Salvatore replied. He didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he turned to Rico. "Get the evidence uploaded. Let the world see him for what he is." Rico nodded, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. Minutes later, video feeds across the city were hijacked. Calloway's confession, recorded by Rico's hidden mic, played for everyone to see. The city that had been drowning in lies finally heard the truth in the voice of its own enforcer. Calloway stared at the screens in horror, his face pale and broken. "You'll burn for this," he hissed. "We already have," Salvatore said. Sirens wailed in the distance, the sound of law arriving too late. Salvatore turned to Isabella and Leo, his voice soft. "It's over?" "No," Isabella said. "It's beginning." She took his hand, gripping it tight. Outside, dawn broke through the storm clouds, washing the cathedral in light. The war had taken everything from them, but it had also given Leo something no one could steal: a name, a truth, and a family born not from blood but from fire. They didn't sleep that night. The storm outside softened into drizzle, but none of them trusted quiet anymore. Inside the safe house, the air smelled of blood, smoke, and exhaustion. Salvatore sat on the edge of the couch, his thigh bandaged tight. The gunfight had ended, but the war inside him hadn't. Isabella poured him a drink, though she knew he shouldn't have it. He took it anyway, staring into the amber swirl like he was reading his own future. Leo sat on the floor nearby, still wide-eyed from everything he'd seen. He had killed a man, or something close to it. The weight of that reality pressed down harder than the pistol ever had. He looked up at Salvatore and asked quietly, "Does it ever go away?" Salvatore didn't pretend not to understand. "No," he said after a long pause. "But it fades. And one day you'll know why it had to happen." Leo nodded, but the answer didn't comfort him. It wasn't supposed to. Rico returned from the window, gun still in his hand. The city's waking up. News vans, cops, chaos. Calloway's confession is everywhere. Half the department's under review. Salvatore exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Good. Let them drown in their own rot, and us?" Rico asked. "What do we do now?" Salvatore looked at Isabella, then at Leo. "Now we vanish." By sunrise, the city was already splitting in two, half calling them heroes, the other half calling for their heads. Newspapers printed grainy shots of the cathedral, some showing Calloway in handcuffs, others showing Salvatore's blood on the stone floor. The headline simply read, "The Ghost Returns." They drove north for hours, past highways and small towns that didn't know their names. Every time Leo saw flashing lights in the distance, his pulse spiked, but no one followed. Eventually, they stopped at a gas station where the owner didn't ask questions. Salvatore leaned against the car while Rico fueled up, the morning fog curling around his boots. "You're bleeding through your bandage," Isabella said. "I've bled worse," he muttered. "That's not the point." She tore a strip from her scarf and retied the dressing herself. "You could let someone take care of you for once." "I did," he said softly. "That's why I'm still here." When they reached the outskirts of the city, Salvatore told Rico to drive ahead and set up one last safe house. "You'll go with him," he said to Isabella and Leo. "Wait for me there." Isabella frowned. "And you? There's something I need to finish." She grabbed his arm. You're not going back there. I'm not, he said, but someone has to tie up the loose ends. If Calloway talked, others will too. I can't let them come after you. Leo stepped forward, his voice trembling. You always say family protects family. Then we stay together. Salvatore's expression softened. You're your mother's son. Stubborn as hell. I learned from you, Leo shot back. For a moment, pride flickered in Salvatore's eyes. Real pride, the kind that couldn't be faked. He knelt down so they were face to face. You don't owe this city anything. You don't owe me anything either. But if you ever decide to fight again, make sure it's for something worth bleeding for. Leo nodded slowly. You're coming back, right? I always come back, Salvatore said, though his voice wavered on the last word. He watched them drive away until their taillights disappeared into the mist. Then he turned toward the river, the same one that had swallowed Carlo De Luca. He stood there for a long time, watching the current pull pieces of the city's sins downstream. By nightfall, the storm clouds returned, low and heavy. Salvatore found himself at one of his old warehouses, empty now except for rats and ghosts. He limped inside, the echo of his footsteps following him like memory. On an old desk sat a single envelope, the handwriting unmistakable. It was Isabella's. He opened it carefully. If you're reading this, it means you went back. It means you couldn't let go. But maybe that's okay. You spent your life protecting everyone else. It's time someone protects you. Inside the envelope was a photograph. Him, Isabella, and Leo at the safe house. None of them were smiling, but the warmth between them was real. He slipped the photo into his coat pocket and sat down, letting the silence fill the room. Meanwhile, miles away, Isabella tucked Leo into a motel bed. He was half asleep, still clutching his father's lighter in his hand. He's coming back, Leo murmured. He promised. He will, she said, though she didn't sound sure. She brushed his hair back and whispered, You saved him too, you know. How? By giving him something he never thought he deserved. A family. The television in the corner played footage of the cathedral, police statements, and one final clip of Calloway's confession, looping over and over. The world was watching, and for once, it wasn't looking away. Isabella turned the TV off and sat beside Leo until sleep finally claimed them both. Back in the warehouse, Salvatore stood on the roof, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. The smoke rose into the night air, merging with the fog. He thought about the boy who had walked into his restaurant years ago with a gun and a question. He thought about the woman who had once been his weakness and became his strength. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't afraid to disappear. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, the same kind Isabella used to write her coded notes, and scribbled a few words. If tomorrow comes, it belongs to him. He tore the page out and tucked it under a glass on the desk, then walked out into the rain. The next morning, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. The city reopened its shops, cleaned its streets, and pretended the cracks weren't still there. But those who had seen the cathedral that night remembered the thunder, the confessions, and the man who had turned his own sins into the city's mirror. Isabella woke to the sound of Leo moving quietly in the kitchen. He was already dressed, eyes focused, his father's lighter resting beside a cup of coffee. Couldn't sleep? She asked softly. Didn't try, he said. The news says they're rebuilding the old courthouse. People are donating money. They're calling it the start of a new era. You don't believe that? I want to, he said, but I know better. He looked out the window toward the faint glow of the skyline. It's like he said. The city doesn't change because of one war. It changes because people stop being afraid to fight back. Isabella joined him at the table. You sound just like him. That's what scares me, Leo said. She smiled faintly. He was never scared of the fight, only of what it turned him into. Then maybe I can do better, Leo said. Maybe that's what he wanted. A knock at the door interrupted them. Leo opened it carefully, ready for anything. It wasn't the police. It was Rico. He looked older, worn, but alive. You found us, Leo said. I always do, Rico replied. He wanted me to give you something. He handed Leo a small wooden box, its surface scarred from years of travel. He told me to wait 1 year after the storm. Said you'd be ready? Leo placed the box on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were 3 things: a pocket watch, a folded letter, and a single silver bullet. The letter was short, Salvatore's handwriting again. Time runs out for all of us. What matters is what we do before it does. This bullet was meant for me. I kept it to remind myself that I still had choices. When the world starts to rot again, don't wait for permission. Use your time. Use your voice. Be better than I was. Leo stared at the letter for a long time. The watch ticked softly, an old heartbeat refusing to quit. Isabella's eyes welled with tears. Rico sat down across from them. He's gone, isn't he? Leo asked quietly. Rico nodded. Found his car by the pier 3 months ago. Empty, no body, just a cigarette still burning in the ashtray. Isabella covered her mouth. He wanted it that way, Rico said. Didn't want anyone writing headlines. Said ghosts work better than martyrs. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The city outside was waking up again. Sirens, traffic, voices blending into one endless hum. Leo picked up the pocket watch and turned it over. On the back, engraved words glinted in the light. Family isn't blood. It's choice. He closed his hand around it. Then we choose to keep going, he said. Years passed. The world shifted. New names replaced old ones. But the legend of Salvatore Moretti refused to die. Some called him the last real Don. Others called him the first man who ever broke the code of silence for the right reasons. There were whispers that he still walked the outskirts of the city, unseen but watching. Nobody knew the truth. And maybe that was the point. Leo grew into his father's shadow, but never wore it like a weight. He studied, fought, and built something different, an organization that worked to protect the children left behind by the city's wars. He called it the Lighthouse. When reporters asked him about the name, he said, "Because my father always believed you could walk out of the dark if you had something worth walking toward." One stormy afternoon, years later, he returned to the bridge where it had all begun. The wind cut sharp against his coat, and the water below churned like memory. He placed the pocket watch on the rail beside a small plaque that read, "In memory of those who fought their demons and found redemption in the fight." The silver bullet lay beside it, glinting like a tear. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The city had its ghosts, and he had his peace. As he turned to leave, a gust of wind carried the faint smell of cigarette smoke, warm and familiar. Leo paused, looked over his shoulder, and smiled faintly. Somewhere out there, the man who had once been both devil and father was watching still. Back downtown, the cathedral bells began to ring again. Their sound echoed through the streets, clear and strong, not as mourning, but as a reminder. Redemption wasn't a miracle. It was a choice made over and over, every single day. That night, as rain returned to the city, a small bar in the old district flickered to life again. A new bartender unlocked the door, flipped the sign, and turned on the lights. Above the counter, framed in dust and shadow, hung an old photograph, Salvatore, Isabella, and Leo. Underneath it, a brass plaque read simply, December 12th. The night a 9-year-old boy pointed a gun at a mafia boss and found his mother. Below the photo, a second plaque carried new words. In a city built on power, loyalty built a family. The boy who walked in with a gun left behind a legacy. And that legacy lives on right here. Like to honor their courage. Subscribe to stand with their family. Share the story so the world never forgets the night loyalty defeated fear.